everyone. I'm pleased to be here at this insightful talk session to introduce an exceptional leader, Mr. Chandrashekara A.S. Tamirisa. Hailing from Oakton, Virginia, Mr. Chandrashekara has made a significant impact globally. He has been a pivotal figure at the Nobel Prize Summit since 2021, where he has shared innovative ideas. He also contributed to shaping the UN's Future We Want document at the Rio Plus 20 conference in 2012, leaving a lasting impression on sustainable development. Mr. Chandrasekhara's commitment to sustainability is evident in his leadership. In the successful 2008 and 2011 Pickens Plan for Energy Self Reliance in Maryland, the plan emphasizes wind energy and natural gas. As the Chief Growth Officer of DG Trans Technologies Incorporation, he drives digital transformation for the benefit of society within the US government. He is also a SAFE certified practitioner, and his contributions as a contributing author to People Matters focus on critical topics such as leaderships and organizational developments. In addition to his professional accomplishments, Mr. Chandrasekhara is a personal sober companion to corporate executives, demonstrating his dedication to supportive individuals in need. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to this inspirational advocate for a brighter future, Mr. Chandrashekara A.S. Tamirza, on the stage. We welcome you, sir, wholeheartedly from the team of Forethought India. We are very pleased to have you, sir.
Thank you, Tanish. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you, Amin, for recording this. What I did was, in preparation for this, I know a lot of people were following me on LinkedIn. Many young people around the world. I see myself as still young, but it's nice to see a lot of young faces, very excited about getting involved, and which is what is needed for any community activity, not just the Nobel Prize. So the issues that are involved are several, right? The first thing is what got me into this to begin with is sustainability. I was like you guys. I was 22 years old, 23 when I had lucky breaks, right? Not everybody gets, but life revolves around luck. My family had a lot of faith in me, so a lot of attention, and that gives you a lot of confidence. They believe in you, so you need somebody to believe in you, right? So I grew up in a large extended family, and so I got a lot of attention. I went to good schools. So you learn how to read and write well in multiple languages. You're in India, right?
Yeah, I'm in
Yeah.
India.
So yeah, India is a country of multiple languages, and of course, I speak English, the language in which I was educated by immersion, even though it's not my native language. And then of course Telugu, which is my native language, and Hindi I speak. I used to be able to write and read fluently, but I can't do that anymore. And I understand Pidgin Urdu from Hyderabad, which is a mix of Pakistani Urdu and Hyderabadi Hindi, Indian Hindi, and some English and some Telugu. So all that. That helps, right? So going to good schools helps, education helps, and I was fortunate that you get lucky breaks, and your family gives you a lot of confidence. Now, besides that, because of those breaks, I ended up eventually going to graduate school in the United States. A lot of people do that. So I'm answering the first question on my list of questions. So if you want on this talk to put it up on the screen, if this is live or if you're recording, so you can put up my questions on the screen. I'm just following the format, right? So I'm just speaking about me first. 6 questions and 5 minutes each. That's about 30 minutes, right? So yeah, and when I came to I didn't go to an IIT in India, and I'm telling you this because it's very important in the educational systems of countries around the world now, which are becoming very elitistic, even in Europe. It wasn't that way in continental Europe, but it is becoming like that. Except in UK and France, it used to be very elitistic, but not in the rest of Europe. But even in Europe, it's becoming that way. So the elitism in education, as long as the quality is maintained, is fine. But elitism in education is problematic, not because of access, right? Not many people have access. So I didn't go to IITs in India, right? I could have gone. I didn't go. I didn't study the way I was supposed to study. I didn't go to IITs. And so I went to a normal state college in Hyderabad, right? And then I got a full scholarship to the United States, and I studied with people who were from IITs. Right? It didn't matter in the end game. It doesn't matter. So what matters
Yeah,
really is, at
that's
some point, everybody in life, you find what motivates you, right? And you need to stick to that, and you learn to realize your motivations. So that's what happened. And I studied engineering, undergraduate, graduate, and from there I moved on to political science, because I was in this project in Toulouse, France, where I was working with a lot of people from European Space Agency, NASA. These were actually working professionals, and the program was funded by the space agencies in the West. And I was a graduate student. Few other young graduate students were also there, and we worked on a project to do a mission to Mars. Right, it's an international mission to Mars. That's what Elon Musk is doing right now. Is
impressive.
that he's not international, but a US mission that he's trying to do, right? So it's the same thing. And this goes back into the 70s in the United States. It's not a new idea. It goes back to Nikola Tesla way back. So a lot of people were like Romans also, right? So it has got a lot of historical context to it. But the point is, when we worked on that, the engineering was fine. I was in engineering. I was a material science graduate student. I was in space resources and manufacturing. So I was on PBS for a snippet. They were asking me, why are you doing this? And it's a big question even now. Why should anybody do space, right? Why should you do it? Earth is just
Yeah,
fine. I can get in my t-shirt, walk out, and feel good about it, right? It's nice. So why should we go to space? It's hostile. And so it's still a lingering question. You never get around to answering that question, right? You just
yeah,
don't have an answer to that, but people do it anyway, right? You do it for utilitarian reasons for this, right? This is because of space. So near Earth space. Now that works, the satellites. But do you need to go to Mars? Things. So these were very important, deep questions that needed some thought. And then I realized that it's not really the engineering. Anybody can do it, right? You sit around and you learn some things, and you can do science, which is what the Nobel Prize are all about. You can do technology from science. But
yeah,
the key question is, can human beings really get along, right? So the most complex part of it is a political question. So how do you make people get along with each other? How do you make people get along with the planet you're on? Because are you going to Mars because you're rejecting Earth, or are you going to Mars for some other reason, right?
yeah,
So these are important questions, and so that got me into political science, because my me going to France was funded in part by the institution that admitted me, half of it, and another half came from the Institute for Astronomy in University of Hawaii, right, which is very prestigious, next to Harvard, and then University of Arizona. Because Hawaii has a big telescope on the mountain, on the islands, on the Big Island. Uh, so they invited the people for a debrief after we got back, to to tell the whole faculty that funded us to go to France what we learned and what we can, because the university wanted to get associated with this institution that invited us, that admitted the two students, right? So the university sent us, paying in full. Uh, so I one of my colleagues was from planetary geosciences. She's a professor someplace else now, in New York, and I chose to go into political science because I talked to two faculty. One was a political scientist called Jim Dater. He's retired now. Another one was Ben Finney. He is an anthropologist at Hawaii. He's also retired now. They're all emeritus, and they sent me there. So I really didn't want to go into astronomy, right? My question was politics. is how do you get people together to, if when you went to the moon, it wasn't the Americans going to the moon, right? It was as if the whole
Mhm.
planet moved. So
Humanity.
when you're doing something as big as Mars, is Elon Musk going to go with SpaceX to Mars and think that only SpaceX did it, or is it an achievement for all of humanity? And what does it mean, all of humanity? Right? What does it mean, all of humanity? These are simple but profound questions, and so I decided to get a PhD in political science. I was a very unlikely admit because I had no background in politics, no undergraduate degree, nothing. And but because I raised all these questions and I was interested, they let me in. And it was just the interest part of it, right? So they didn't really let me in. They said you can take classes at the graduate level and we'll see how you'll do, right? So I took classes, 3 classes for one whole semester. I got 8 A's in all of them. The rigor is still there. They just don't, there's no grade inflation, right? You need to go through the
Mhm.
class, you need to write your
Yeah.
papers, and stuff. So just because you know people, you don't get grades, right? Um, so that was the first semester, and then I applied formally. They asked me to apply, and then I applied, and they admitted me in the PhD program. So the question really there was about, this is how I'm segueing into the question of sustainability, right? So the question there really that grabbed my attention. Jim Data was a futurist, and his office was right next to the office of another professor who was German, who became professor at University of Hawaii, called Manfred Henningsen, right? So he his his point of interest in political science, right? The subject of interest was the Holocaust, because he was born at a time when Germany was still dealing with the Holocaust. And he took it very seriously. He was a historian. He was also a political philosopher. And I was fortunate to take 2 classes from him, right? One class I wrote a paper on science, critical of the entire scientific method, right? So, and that was in political philosophy on Nietzsche and things like that, and which is a big part of today's conversation in Silicon Valley, right? It's
Yeah.
because the technologists think that they can do anything, they can do anything, and in principle, immortality. So, and know it all, right? So, and that's one understanding of Nietzsche. It's not necessarily the right one. And then and so the second seminar that I took with him was on the Holocaust, right? So he invited very prominent figures also. He met with Václav Havel at that time when the Cold War was ending. He went to, in fact, Czech Republic. At the time, it was still Czechoslovakia. So he met with Havel when he was about to become the president, and he came back, and he had interesting things to say. And then there was Rudy Rummel, who was nominated for the Peace Prize. He didn't get it, but he was nominated. So he coined the word democide, right? Why governments kill people. And there was Yehuda Bauer, who is in Israel now, I think Tel Aviv somewhere. He wrote the seminal textbook on the history of the Holocaust, right? So it is a very difficult question to deal with, and I didn't finish that paper. I still have an incomplete. I got my degree, of course. A master's in political science. I didn't finish my PhD, but what grabbed my attention as somebody entering political science from engineering at the graduate level was modernity, right? What is modernity? So you have the printing press from Gutenberg. The Chinese have something to do with it, but the mechanization is mostly German, right? So it's the
Yeah.
Protestant Reformation and all that stuff. So if you really, I would put modernity there. I would locate it in 15th century, in parallel when the Renaissance was happening in the church in Italy in the south, right? So what is the meaning of technological modernity? What is the meaning of science for which Nobel Prizes are awarded, right? And what is and you get technology from science, and technology feeds back into more science. So that is empirical scientific process, right? So what is the meaning of modernity? What is the purpose of it? So Alfred Nobel says in his will that it is for the greatest benefit of humankind. So from 1901 to 2023, which is 122 years with 1 or 2 years skipped, there were so many Nobel Prizes. Now, did it really benefit humanity? Right? It made life, in my view, it made life very convenient to live, very convenient, right? We live well. I mean, you're in India, I'm
Yeah.
here, I'm talking to you, I'm in my house. So is it benefiting humanity? So what needs to be done for science to benefit humanity? Do scientists need power, right? Do scientists need uh, do governments need to work better, or is it democracy, right? Or is it Chinese authoritarianism, or is it Russian authoritarianism, or someplace else, right? So is it a political question, or is it a scientific question for the greatest benefit of humanity? So if you take all the prizes that are in the Nobel for sustainability, the definition of sustainability was the first time formulated by the United Nations, right, 1987. So it basically says every generation right now has to live well, and in the future, it's on my website, and in the future I have a link to the document, and in the future we need to ensure future generations also live just as well. So how do you make that possible? That's what's on my one page web, tamirisa.com, right? So that is the problem I was trying to solve. So I began like everybody else, like the Indians are talking about now, the Chinese are talking about, everybody is, the West has lived well and they'll continue to live better. Why can't we live like them? Right? It's a core question. The West polluted.
Yeah.
They're asking us not to pollute. Why can't we do that? Right? So it's a climate question. So to solve the, if you ask a question, what matters is how you frame the question of sustainability, right? So can you really do that for the foreseeable future? If you ask, for example, you can ask distinguished economists and ask them, these are the models that you're using of economic growth. Whether India wants to grow, China wants to grow. That's what I'm saying in the first paragraph on my webpage, right? India wants to grow, China wants to grow. So can everybody live the same way for the next millennium? Like it happened in the last millennium. Can you do it for the next millennium, right? So how do you solve that sustainability problem? And that is what I set out to solve beginning 91, taking it more as a political question than anything else, with everything sort of supporting the political analysis, whether it's economics or sociology or anything like that, right? Now, and I think uh, the question of sustainability is important for everybody, and how you see it going forward is a paradigm shift. You cannot look at it from the lens of the past. Everybody has to change,
Yeah.
right? So and you can't go to Mars and live. This is a nice place to live, right? So people need to get their feet on the ground and start thinking very realistically about what is achievable, and come together and do it while figuring out a way to resolve disagreements without killing each other, right? So that is the idea of how you get to sustainability. So peace becomes very important. Telling stories, as in literature, in the Nobel, becomes important. Storytelling is very important, right? Storytelling
Yeah.
from your perspective, which is what in political science you call it postmodernism, right? So you deconstruct the story somebody else tells you, and you tell your side of the story. And in the conversation between the two stories, you get to some semblance of truth, right? So it is not about the British story of India or the Hindu story of the Muslims in India or vice versa, right? So everybody has to tell their story, and in that conversation among stories and literature, you get to some semblance of truth, right? So then you take your physics, you take your physiology, medicine, you take your chemistry, and you take the applications of understanding nature, and you try to figure out how to make the lives of all these people better, so that you give them self-determination. Meaning, I'm not saying that as a Hindu, for example, as a Hindu Brahmin, I have to live an Orthodox Brahmin life, right? So
Yeah.
I have a choice. So in other words, I'm liberating myself from what is deep acculturation. Deep acculturation is not just education. Deep acculturation is the culture itself, which is so subliminal, psychological, right? Now, the ultimate liberation comes when you extricate yourself from that, and people have that choice. So when you experience that, then you're totally free, right? So, and that is in a way a purpose of democracy also. In this storytelling, you learn from each other, you understand each other, right? So let me get to the rest of the questions that I have. So I covered 1 and 2, the brief summary of the prizes, and obviously what is the greatest benefit to humanity. And I would urge people who are following me on LinkedIn and other places is that the greatest benefit, remember, is not altruism, right? At least in my view, there is no altruism. Now, Alfred Nobel wouldn't have been able to establish his foundation had he been altruistic, right? So he invented the dynamite. He was a businessman. It's a private foundation. And there's millions of dollars that's going in. So what the world needs for sustainability is the private money thinking, not governments, private money, which is in trillions of dollars, thinking about in a sensible manner about sustainability, right? And this raises questions about economic growth, raises questions about what standards of living are acceptable for everybody, right? There's an economic question, and how do you achieve it politically, right? It's important, and how do you fit it into cultural self-determination. In other words, you want to live the life the way you want to live, right? Not necessarily the way you're born. So they're two different things. So it takes some free thinking to be able to understand yourself. So what's important is the benefit to humanity ultimately is the benefit to yourself. So you need to think about how does it benefit me in a manner that doesn't deprive somebody else of their ability to do the same thing, because we're living in a society, in a community, right? So if I'm thinking about how something benefits me, what is in it for me, then I need to think about it also in the context of my community. Because when I'm taking something or when I'm benefiting myself, I don't want not to benefit other people, or prevent other people from benefiting themselves, right? Deprive them of that. So so you don't want to, it is in effect a zero-sum game in economic terms, right? But spiritually it isn't a zero-sum game, right? So how do you reconcile the the spiritual non-zero sum game with the economic zero-sum game? That is the politics, right? That's the political question. So so how are they relevant since their inception? They're relevant in the sense that the fundamental scientific contributions have been extraordinary, right? Very significant. The question is, has it benefited humanity? Because human condition fundamentally hasn't changed. Now, are you going to change it using science and technology, like in science fiction there's in fact National Science Foundation program to do that, right? So to fundamentally alter human beings, like in Star Wars or Star Trek, and make them different, to take away the negative things in the negative behaviors and only reinforce the positive. Can you do it with science? Is there a gene for evil behavior and a gene for good behavior, right? So there isn't. Both are integral to the human condition. So the question, or do you do it like the Chinese, to give incentives and punishments for being honest, right? You can't do things like that. So uh, so what is important is to develop a sense of thinking, right? People should only always ask and answer only one question: I'm going to act in my own benefit. Now, is my benefit enhanced if I work together with my community and make sure somebody else's ability to do the same thing I'm not depriving them of it? I'm not preventing them from doing the same thing, right? So if you ask that simple question, then you get two sides of the same coin, the heads and the tails. The heads is you, the tails is your community, right? So you can't have the coin without both sides. And when everybody starts thinking like that, unless people have are deranged and they have some psychiatric neurological problem. In general, most people are normal, they're bright, they're intelligent, and everybody can come to the same conclusion that I'm coming to, right? I'm not God didn't appear to me and tell me that this is how you should behave. So you just have to think. And an important part of democracy is being able to stand on your own 2 feet, using your own mind, and think for yourself, right? So that's the most important thing. And when you can do that, it's then everybody can be a constructive participant in the process, right? So how are they relevant for the future state of the world? For the current state, we got as far as we got, right? So the question is, there are limitations to science, there are limitations to technology. Uh, I don't believe there's immortality. I don't think we can get there. I think we have to come to terms with our mortality, that we'll all die at some point. The idea is for the species to continue to exist, which is biologically instinctive. Even an amoeba does it, right? A bacteria does it, paramecium does it, basics of biology, right? Everybody does it. Life, from single cell to multicellular organisms, everybody does it. So the question is, the way we do it is, we are like any other animal, whether it's bacteria or human beings. In my view, we are the same, right? We have our own way of perpetuating our species. So how do we make that happen for as long as possible, knowing that at some point it's going to end? So we have to come to terms with mortality, then you get to peace. If you don't come to terms with mortality, you don't get to peace, right? So, and this whole Nobel thing, it's very important. I would urge all your listeners and whoever is looking at this recording to go to the Nobel website, and they have a lot of educational resources there, particularly with young people, right? To ask difficult questions. Don't hesitate. What you have to do is ask difficult questions, and don't feel that you'll offend somebody. You don't have to feel defensive that you don't know something. All that you need to find out in today's world is how to find answers, right? Learn how to learn and how to find answers. And if you can do that, I think you can all the whole point of this Nobel Prize Summit is for everybody to be on it, if you can, right? So it's just that I'm trying to demonstrate that it's possible for everybody to do it. It takes different levels of effort from different people to do it, and if you want to do it, you should be able to do it. If you don't want to do it, I think you should be on the path to learn, right? And don't think that in India, if you're there, you need to go to JNU or St. Stephen's or St. Xavier's or an IIT or get to Oxbridge or Harvard. You don't have to do that, right? You have the web, which is what you're doing in Forethought. Why am I here? Because you are exposing education. You're providing access, extraordinary access that Harvard doesn't, for example, right? To a lot of people. And it is access that's what matters. Once 100% have access, maybe 20% come out okay. But when you cut access down to less than 7%, you're automatically cutting out a lot of people
Yeah, a
from
lot of things.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's basically my talk. And I think the Nobel Prizes, the covering the last one is you yeah, you have to be a scientist and do well, and you don't chase the Nobel Prize, right? It's not even an aspiration. You have to have a question that you're trying to solve.
It's
It
awesome.
is a yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, it is sustainability, global sustainability, right? For a physicist, it is something else, and for a chemist, it's something else. For a physiologist, something else. Economist, of course, was not one of the original prizes. Came out sometimes in the late 50s or early 60s, I think. It went to a Swedish person first, then Paul Samuelson. So it came from what do you call the Riksbank of Sweden, right? So they fund it, and it's the oldest central bank that did the currency first. So it's so all these prizes, yeah, you have to be those because they're by invitation only. You have to be those you have to have some accomplishment there, and all that. Activist peace, right? Typically activists end up getting peace prizes or leaders or global leaders, right? So and I would urge people to write, which is literature, okay, and be community participants if you cannot do science, right? I mean, I can do all of them. So uh, it's I'm educated in all of them also. So the question is, you just have to pick the it's problem selection. You just have to pick what you want to work on. Don't chase the Nobel Prize. Just be good at what you do, right? And then if it happens, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't, right? So that is what I would tell people. So I think I covered my 30 minutes.
Uh, that was really very awesome. Like, I was just having a small question. Like, as you see right now, India is growing. Like, India's economy and everything, development and things are growing at a very at a very good pace. So, what do you think are the future possibilities, or what do you think as students in India, who are studying in India, basically, should be chasing, or should be pursuing, or kind of thinking to have betterment for the world, even for themselves, uh, in the field of sciences, and like there are many fields. Like, so what do you think can be the best possibilities or best ways to go for them, like kind of a roadway? uh yeah.
Yeah. So I think that Raghuram Rajan, right? He has a lot of name recognition in India. He's with what's his name? Another student of his, I think, is he recently published a book. It was released in India. Different people are trying to come up with different approaches, but my approach for India is different, right? It is India. Has very unique constraints. India doesn't have natural resources, right? India is the most populous country in the world. India is, I would say, the oldest civilization as historians currently define it, extant civilization. So it pretty much has as a professor of mine, Johan Galtung, right? He's a very unorthodox thinker. He is a sociologist from Colombia, is a Norwegian mathematician. These are I always studied with interdisciplinary people, so I don't confine myself to one silo, right? So
Yeah.
he's the one who initially raised the question of development, you know development from multiple cultural perspectives. So in other words, let's say, how does a particular country uh, sees itself as even Amartya Sen raised the same question, right, with Mahbubul Haq. So there
Hmm.
is the Human Development Index and all these things, right? So the question is, GDP is a cookie cutter approach, right? China wants to be America. Now, that doesn't work. It's going to fail.
Yeah.
I'm telling you now, it's going to fail, right? It won't work. So the question is what does development mean for you? So initially, when I got going on this, was in 2000. On GeoCities, I started a simple website called Global Development Perspectives, right, as a take on GDP. So GDP is gross domestic product, and I took the thing that Galton mentioned in his international development class seminar that I took. He was talking about multiple cultural, as a sociologist, so multiple cultural perspectives of what development means, right? And so I started the GDP thing. And Galtung is a big critic of the United States. So he lives somewhere, I think, between Norway, Spain, and Switzerland and France. So he used to teach the French bureaucrats also in the elite écoles. Um, so he's a big critic of the United States, and there's some other people in economics also, like for example Herman Daly, right? He's emeritus at University of Maryland. So he's the one who wrote books about sustainable economics and things like that, right? So a steady state economy. So the question is going to fail. GDP is going to fail, so, right? So the question, to respond to your question about India, it has serious natural resource constraints, the largest population, and so what is the way to go? What is the way forward? The way I think about countries is, which is my vision on my website as to how the world should be in the end game, right? Is, how do you see India for itself? Forget about the United States, forget about the West. with 60 million people living at a GDP of $70,000 a year, right? Like or slightly less than that in the UK. So, or in Canada, even that it's 40 million people, right? And they consume a lot. So you cannot live like that. And India is about 50% of Indian labor force is still in agriculture, right? So, which is not a bad thing. In fact, it's a good thing. China was the same way before. Now, Mao destroyed a lot of people, but the point is China was agrarian. So the question is, how do you balance agrarianism, which is what I'm talking about on my website, agrarianism with industrialization, right? So if you look at early societies, whether it was Mohenjo-daro and Harappa by the Indus Valley, or if you take by the Nile, if you take what do you call the fertile crescent, right, in the Middle East, even if you take any number of early societies that were all agrarian, if you envision an agrarian society with a bare bones, clean, green technologies, simplify it, right? Make it simple, because if you look at just economic data, today's economies are increasingly becoming services oriented, right? And if you take the economics of services, the pricing is arbitrary. So I can charge you $10,000 an hour, I can charge you zero, right? You'll get the same thing. So the question, and if I'm doing this on Google, it's zero, right? Their revenue is coming from
Yeah.
advertising. So the question is, how do you look at that whole economic model to answer the question posed by Gro Harlem Brundtland, who was the Prime Minister of Norway? So she led that UN commission to come up with that report, and fundamentally defining the sustainability problem. So growth itself as an economic concept comes into question, and a lot of Greek economists were thinking about that, and so everybody eventually comes up to the same conclusion, that you seriously need to look at the concept of growth within the constraint of natural resources. And what is good for India, to answer your question, in the future, is stick to agriculture, right? And Gandhi, for example, was successful in India and Pakistan, by the way, right? So it doesn't matter which is which, or Bangladesh. So Hindu or Muslim is, for me, it's immaterial. Or Christian, Indian Christian. So the question is, India lives in its villages, right? That was Gandhi's seminal observation. It doesn't live in Delhi, doesn't live in Mumbai, Kolkata, Madras, Bangalore, wherever, right? So it lives in its villages. So you need to get to smart villages. Keep your agriculture. I was in I worked in India on sustainability for some time. So I went back to which village? The village in which I was born, right? So you need to stick to your villages and make them smart, improve your quality of life, and you're done. So all that India needs is good infrastructure, high quality infrastructure, and live and keep the villages. India is its villages. India is not its metropolitan towns. So people don't have to migrate from the village to the city. They have to keep the people in the village and make their lives better, and keep that agrarian life the way it is, and let the industry support agriculture, not the other way around, and services, right? So you need to minimize services, also have to be minimized, and services pricing is arbitrary. So India has a solution, and I think India has a disruptive solution, to tell the truth. So Narendra Modi has to figure out how he's going to do it, because he's talking about sustainability. He talked to the United States Congress also, but he's not going in the right direction. Militarism is in that, for example, or getting to $5 trillion economy, or whatever economy it is by 2050 or 2070 is in that, right? So I'm not taking any political position about India one way or another, but what I'm saying is, they're talking about sustainability in India, but they're going in the wrong direction. So the way to do sustainability disruptively for India to lead the world, right? If America cannot do it, it's very difficult for America to get around to do it also. The Europeans generally have the right ideas, nobody else. In fact, even Africa does it. So Africa is thinking like India, right? So the question is, India can do it because, first, it is constrained, and second, it already has the advantages of being agrarian. So don't go away from being agrarian, be agrarian, and take advantage of that to become sustainable, right?
Stick to the roots.
Exactly. So India is going in the wrong direction, in my view. I think it just has to become stay with the basics and the fundamentals, stay with the villages, and improve the quality of life there. And India is done for the foreseeable future. Live off the land, right? And India can do that. So you won't get emissions, and if the rest of the world does the same thing, it's even better.
That was quite an insight. Uh, so, like, Amin, sir,
Are we over time, or is it okay for you guys
are we
to?
over time? Yeah, I
We're
was
not
like,
over
I was
time
about to.
actually. We don't have time constraints. You can continue if you want. Or
Okay, I'll just take one more question. Like it's
yeah,
my
yeah, sure.
personal. Like I have seen quite. See, like in India, basically, let's talk about the grassroots level. The students basically who are in undergraduations or graduations,
Right.
many of them, and in like it's a lot bunch of students. So everyone doesn't get the research environment like IITs or NITs. Which we have in our country. So,
Yeah.
what can be small steps for them, like kind of small bits which they can like? There's obviously a very major portion which is middle class in India, to be true, and students can't afford. Many of them, like almost a lot of them, cannot afford to go
Yeah.
abroad by themselves.
Yeah.
So what do you think, what can be small steps or like put in chipping in their efforts to get the research environment or environment which just forces them, or not in a good way, kind of to
Yeah.
learn things more and to elaborate on
Right.
things and to
So
think in that
you,
way?
you're doing it already, right? That's what we're doing right now. So
Yeah,
it,
Forethought
yeah.
India,
So
it's a
exactly,
very
exactly. So I mean, a
fantastic
more
platform.
sophisticated version of the same thing is Coursera, right? For example, and Coursera was started by somebody at Stanford called Andrew Ng. I think is Vietnamese American. So the idea is to provide access. What is important is access, right? It is the access. It's economics. It's the access and the price. So are you getting quality, access, quality, and price? Three things, right? If you're getting access, quality, and price, and if you build it on that, low cost, maximum access, and high quality. Now, Coursera can potentially do that. It's not doing it yet. I mean, it's just there, right? So there's a lot of resistance to it. There's a lot of resistance because of elitism, right? Because people want to restrict, not expand. The tendency is to restrict. And what is important is to have a population that can think for itself, and the metal of a democracy comes in its ability of the leader to be able to work with people who can think for themselves rather than shutting them down, right? So that's what's important. And I think if you build it on access, for example, if you take IIT Mumbai, right? So
Yeah.
if you take IIT Mumbai, now it's a preeminent school right now, is working on the AI Alliance and all that, right, with IBM. It's a preeminent school in computer science. So if I took IIT Mumbai, forget about MIT or Stanford or something else, take IIT Mumbai and let them put out their entire curriculum of computer science, right? If you can talk, for example, you're doing this, right? If you can go to IIT Mumbai, talk to the administrator and say, you know what, I'm doing Forethought. And what I need is all this stuff, your courseware. Can I expose it through Forethought? It's just one medium for me to expose your online courseware, right? And
Mm,
expose it. So don't knock the IIT. So what I'm saying is you don't have to knock them. You have to make them accessible to everybody. So I took my
everybody.
JEE, I didn't get in. It is immaterial whether you took it and you didn't get in. The question is 5 years down the road, if you want to solve a computer science problem by taking a class that is offered by a professor at IIT, can you still do that? And if you're prevented from doing it just because you didn't crack your JEE, it is nonsense, right? So
Yeah,
so so
true.
that is what you need to do. I mean, you Forethought, go to the IIT administrator and say, or director, whatever they call it, and say, look, just like MIT is exposing its courseware, some of it now, if you go to their website, You just say, I need IIT Mumbai. Don't knock them, right? You need to work with them. So it is a tough process. They're going to rebuff you. They're going to put you off. They'll say you're not in the top 50. You never got into an IIT, therefore you're not worth it, right? So that's so you have to take that rejection. So you have to be there and then push and then say, look, I need this course where I want to expose it through Forethought, and say people are going, whoever is interested will do it and make something of themselves. So you give access to people for them to use it. If they don't want to use it, it's up to them. It's not up to an IIT to say you can or you
Yeah.
cannot. It's up to you to say whether you can or you cannot, right? So
True.
if you can get to that level of access and education reform at a low cost, but at the same time, the IIT needs to keep up its quality. For example, the quality is falling, right? So the quality has to be kept up by them if they want to stay in the game. So otherwise, somebody else is going to do it. So nobody has a guarantee to stay at the top forever, right? The wins are pretty. What do you call the winds are. They're just not the breeze. The winds are hard, right? So when you get to the top, you'll get blown away. It's hard to stay there. So that's what you need to do in Forethought, right? It's so don't think about an IIT or a JNU or St. Stephen's or this or that, something in Calcutta or in Mumbai, right? You need to go to these people and say, I saw your business model. So you need to go to these people and say, I need to be able to expose your courseware to as many people as possible. What do I need to do? Right? I'm doing it as a nonprofit. Can you donate? For any number of people, for any number of reasons, not because they're not bright, they just couldn't do it. At some point, they may want to do it, right? So that is how you change education. And when you can do that, if out of 100 people in the total population, at least 20 will benefit. Right now, 4 or 5 are benefiting, right? You just expand that. And then you get a better society.
That was great. That was a very great conversation with you. So I mean, sir, do you have any questions? Like,
No, I don't. I
because
No,
don't. So just
I don't actually. And do you have any more questions, Mr. Tamirsia?
no, I don't. I don't. So
And
yeah, just
Tanish?
keep me posted on how things are going, right? And
Definitely.
show me this recording. It's sometime if I can see it somewhere.
Yeah, we'll be uploading it
Yeah,
sure,
to
sure.
our channel. Yeah, I'll
right.
be sending you the link. Definitely.
Yeah,
Okay. Thank you
great.
so much for your time. Thank you so
Sure,
much.
Thank
you're
you, sir.
welcome.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Had a very great